Chill here with Sirius Talis and it is 26 degrees Pisces in between Saturn and Neptune, which is a great time to talk about Saturn Neptune in general. And the midheaven was just crossing the galactic center. Moon is 5 degrees Aries, sparking a Mars at 18 degrees Sagittarius, this ruled by Jupiter at 24 degrees retrograde, conjoining Procyon. Let's talk about something. First of all, I want to upload a video with you. I've already tended to the uploading. Now it's time to Premiere, not just an editing program. And this is, people are like, what else did she do in her life? But this is exactly what this episode is going to be about. Stay tuned. Now, for those of you who are not currently watching my premiere episode, which is the only excuse to skip this one, let's talk about the abolition of workplaces when we talk about sexual sovereignty. What am I talking about? So think back to the Me Too. In the Me Too, the testimonies that came about from women in the entertainment industry were about the situation where a lady says no to a producer or to a director or to somebody that's supposed to make decisions. That person tells her she will never be able to be an actress or singer or whatnot. Basically, very simply put, she has to switch a country, switch a field of profession. She literally has to put on hold everything that she planned in that particular field and any field that's surrounding it. How do you think they're going to abolish any type of violation of sexual sovereignty? Much the similar fashion. This is extortion called deadline, Saturn Neptune in 0 degree Aries. And it's gonna look like one by one by one by one by one by one, all the fields, all the professions, anything that was anywhere remotely rapey, which is of course the entire economy, is going to collapse. But in such a way where the people that have been money laundering through a supposed legit business of are going to not be able to do that legit business. It's going to go to the legit businesses. And we're going to hear a lot of people saying, I can't trade, I can't this, I can't that. Well, those people were already involved with, you know, just being okay with somebody being sexually harassed at the workplace. That person that was harassed was disincluded from the entire industry, sometimes the entire region, county, or country, because they said no. How do you think? What do you think is going to happen to those that went with the perpetrators, the fields, and so on and so forth? Now, that type of collision is likened only to, remember when the iceberg suddenly fell into the sea and there was this megalithic wave. Okay, it was not the tsunami that happens when there's an earthquake, the sea withdraws and then floods the city. By the way, I think in Japan or China they're having sponge shorelines cities that are going to just absorb the water in case of tsunami. So this is one of the fascinating inventions I saw. But I'm talking about, we're very likely to have this megalithic iceberg suddenly breaking into the ocean. Okay, that is very likely going to be the ingress. So Valentine's Day, prepare, brace yourself. We had such a thing. I talked about it in my other channels a while ago. So that's very likely likened to the actual physical event that's going to be, which is an iceberg breaking into the ocean and a sudden kind of like a 500 meters wave washing over. That's the amount of economy flood that we're going to be seeing, because all those fields that we already saw being taken by perpetrators are going to collapse one by one by one by one by one by one by one. And remember, when it comes to the real estate of Epstein is on sale. We're talking not just real estate, we're talking the banks that hold. Now, definitely there are going to be military, I was talking about the Red Cross, because like military, hospital, and so on. But that was this sudden eureka that I had, that I really had to share, because this is where we absolutely are going to see that exactly in the way that people were removed from being able to work in entire industries because they said no, or live in entire regions and even countries because they said no. Now the world is changing, and that's going to look very, very challenging. Let's just put it that way. Because to the people that were just, abiding by, they are going to have the entire industry collapsing, and one of some of that we see with AI, but that's not even the issue. It's going to be those that were the perpetrators being outcast in much the similar fashion that the people that said no to them were outcast from entire industries. And then we're going to have the head of the fishes pop up. What do I mean by that? Remember when Saturn and Neptune first ingress into Aries? The thinning of the veil. Oh, where was MIA? Where was oh, well, that artist? Oh, that person. What's up with that person? All these head popping, kind of like, yeah, have you seen that you haven't seen me around in a while? That's because Epstein, Epstein, Diddler, Epstein, Diddler, Diddler, Epstein, Epstein, Diddler, and the classified projects budget attached. Now you can more famously recognize them as ICE. So what we're seeing, and first of all, people are going to be recognized with the problem. What does that mean? Anything that's rapey is going to be recognized as the problem. That's Aries. When was the Me Too? Uranus met Aries in Aries. There was no due procedure to the people that were raped and murdered, some of them. We're not in Libra anymore. What do you think is going to happen to the land of the rapists? And those that try to liberate themselves by raping, and it's usually raping the innocent because they work with the occult give the same thing that Eurekas talks about, okay? Now, it's going to happen on a worldly scale, and that's the Eureka I got when the moon in the world was crossing the world decan, okay, the first decan of Aries, with the midheaven crossing on the galactic center. And I was just sitting, just watching a video, and completely unrelated, and just kind of like, oh, wait a second. No way. No, that can't be. No way. Wait a second. Okay. That's the Saturn Neptune. Lo and behold, the ascendant is squashed between Saturn and Neptune. Particularly susceptible, those that tried to exclude people from ever being in an industry, from ever doing anything without trafficking or rape or crime, but particularly sexual boundary violation. Those that sustain their identity by complying with rape. Okay? It's very, very. I know, Aries is the god of war. For Aries to be re-included, she has to give up the rapey stuff. Which means no rape. You can be included, but you can't rape. Okay, remember? There's no justification for that, because Ares, the god of war, was on a mission to eradicate rape, and everything was okay so that there would not be rapists. Now we're talking about the world degree. We're not talking about, and the episode I uploaded has to do with origin and the wound around origin. But Aries and Chiron here is this notion of course you can be re-included. Of course you can be re-included. You just have to not rape, that's all. But what about this? But what about this? But what about this? This is where businesses are going to fall in sectors. Because that person that did that sector rape, well, he can't be doing that sector anymore. That's how the people were excluded from having viable income and housing by myriad of excuses when they said no to being raped, when they escaped trafficking. We have the juxtaposition of both Chiron and Aries, which is curating the wound around being included, and in the sign of the god of war, Ares, and Saturn Neptune. Okay? On a world degree, what is the common thing on a world degree that needs to dissolve? Climbing up the ladder, being dependent on giving one's identity, life energy, being raped, and or psychiatrically tugged as crazy when they say no. The gatekeeping is like a dam that is collapsing, and is going to be a flood of talents. Okay, if I think about Asians. Every average Asian that practiced singing can sing better than our most competent white or black artists worldwide. Remember when the ad libs for the Beyonce Dubai thingy came about? Who was topping the chart? Asians. It's not cultural appropriation. They just do it better. And they would go about it in kind of like recording a short, going about their day, cooking, cleaning, you know. So when it comes to um, the most talented or competition based on talented, it's like the dam of, rapey, manufactured elite is collapsing into a flood of people that are authentically talented. Okay? Any person, I look at astrology, for example, or Rahu reading, okay? Any person coming to their 40s, seeing my 1, 2 videos, and then refining and refining and refining will be 1,000 times better, accurate, and whatnot than I could ever have been. Lucky for me, my Rahu transcends time. So it's a nice retirement, okay? To be able to enjoy the fruits of the people, like letting another person do it to develop the refinement and that, and so on, and then being the benefactor of that. And so, what is likely to happen is, of course, a mixture of many tendencies, but um, but that particular continuation of the threads that we've been seeing since Uranus ingressed into Aries, which was resource-based economy, the 10th revolution, so we talk about 2018 Uranus ingressed into Taurus 7 years back would be 2010, 2011. 2010, I saw something with the 2010, that was the Uranus ingress, the 2010, the moose, what they done to the moose, what they done to the moose. Now, this is going to have a trajectory all the way through the 50s because of Aries, but Chiron is now touching on that topic. And Neptune is also associated with sacrifice, with Saturn is a reality check on the strategy of sacrifice worldwide. It's both going to be the attempts to implement that, which we have to understand that's okay, it's a megalithic world degree with all that entails. At the same time, those, and this is also Chiron in Andromeda constellation, those that relied on sacrifice for war, for resources, and so on and so on, are not going to get the victory that they were wishing to get. Because Aries is Aries in this decan is those that were put to be sacrificed. Remember, it was Andromeda, it was Medusa's head that was used to save Andromeda. The rage of Beta Persei is actually used to prevent more sacrifice. And why was the nymph in the story of Andromeda to be sacrificed? So that it will save the village from the flood. That's not exactly what happens if she is sacrificed, and the rage of Medusa came to haunt the entire village. This is, basically, how would they let that lady go? That they think that they need to sacrifice a nymph to save the city. Well, they were haunted by the rage of the Medusa. And the man that came to save, I think it was the same man that raped Medusa, came to save Andromeda with the rage of Medusa. Because Medusa could turn men into stone. She could freeze everything with her rage. She could make the world stop. And what is freeze? Stone is Saturn. Dead bodies upon dead bodies. Dead. Saturn. Bones. Saturn. And the face of Medusa was the face of the village that sacrificed, that didn't believe, that punished. And that rage is used to save a lady from being sacrificed to the sea monster, which is basically the very sea monster saves the lady from being sacrificed. And we can look at it as also the journey of Poseidon through Aries, because Poseidon, Neptune, is going to go through that journey through Aries. And that was the journey of becoming an Ares. Everything that goes through the Aries is becoming an Ares. And to understand that the god of the sea cannot take the nymphs, which is basically what he did with Medusa. Okay, even the god of the sea cannot take the nymphs as a sacrifice. Under no guise, including sacrifice, can the nymphs be taken to the sea, or can the women be sacrificed, or the virgins be sacrificed, or the children, because this is also the men dressed as women with Aries. Okay, there is a masquerade issue with Aries in Aries, because Aries basically sent the Trojan horse, which was looking like it was crossing as legit, and then caused the Trojan War. And the journey of Neptune, first Saturn and then Neptune, through Aries is the journey of becoming an Ares. As the god of gods, the god of the sea, no god has the right to rape, and the only thing that can be transmuting is to abolish the practice of sacrifice. And the people that have placements in there, sometimes they go throughout their life in the journey of thinking that, well, sexual sovereignty maybe is not a big issue, but during war people do what they have to do. Or somebody can help somebody by trafficking them and so on. And they themselves many times were trafficked. And they go through this journey of becoming an Ares. And Ares was killing all the rapists. But also the rapist within. The outer planets, now Aries and others, bring a global, okay, aspect to that value. Now, Saturn, Neptune is not yet meeting Aries, is not yet meeting Andromeda. but he's making the baby steps on becoming Ares. This is why we're going to see the economy collapses, because even if, let's say, I try to take animal products because some cattle is being breeded by rape, try to purchase from places where less likely people would be raped there. Going into, I don't know, indigenous businesses, thinking about what currency and so on and so forth. Basically, it's like, what? The entire world, good morning. The entire world is collapsing because the entire world is going through the journey of becoming Ares. And that's why it's going to be famine, and it's going to be in the food sector, in the business sector, in the housing sector, and many things collapsing because what was sustained by, and you think about it, even for example with a talisman or a stone, um, sometimes there would be a talisman that would explode, okay, or would break. It's like, well, why did that happen? Served its role. And with the Saturn Neptune, it can happen. Okay, it can be that particular explosion, or okay, or something of that sort. And this is where, and then people ask, well, what would replace, okay, death, mass death? What did Ares do? Kill the rapists. Now, can somebody recover from being a rapist? Of course, but they're going to have to abolish rape. This is the story of Poseidon, okay? The same Poseidon that blamed the nymph that turned men into stone, used the head, the stone, to save a woman from rape by a village that would sacrifice it to the sea monster. Who's the sea monster? That's Poseidon. And there is a dissociation even within the self, Aries, around that transformation. Of Poseidon becoming an Ares, saving the nymph from being sacrificed to the sea monster. Who's the sea monster? Poseidon, but he can't say it. Now, many versions of the story of Andromeda were that she would be saved only if she will wed the savior. Okay? We can expect and predict with Chiron going through that decan, and the fact that tropically we're talking already about the Ares sign, that that's not going to be a condition that could be accepted. So we're going to have particularly the Taurus ascendants here, where this falls on the decan of unconditional, on the house of unconditional love. By the way, the house of the bedroom is the house of unconditional love. Okay, just It's not a house, even thinking about sexual function, it doesn't happen with expectation. It's also a house of miraculous healing. They say, what's behind the miracle? Well, sexual sovereignty. What's behind sexual sovereignty? Unconditional love. You see, people say, but I need sex. What do you need underneath sex? Do you need a hug? Do you need a conversation? Do you need but actually an achievement, a win? Like, what's underneath? That when you go to the bedroom, you're stripped of that underneathness, and yet to go to the bedroom exposes you to that underneathness. It's also the house of jails, hospitals, seclusion, islands, and gulags. There's something very intricate about this. Is considered the water of preconception, where Eris is the head of the baby. And people that gave birth naturally or gave birth with from, the baby that was growing in their body, um, they talk about becoming the void. Now, if we talk about the archetypes, we think about Medusa, then we think about Andromeda, and then we think about Sedna. Sedna's story, in all the versions of the story, I think, except for those where she ended up living happy with a dog, then she would become the goddess of the marine life. And all of these stories was about Sedna not finding a human prospective husband. And yet, if you ask Inuit people, how do they venerate Sedna, or what do they ask for Sedna from Sedna for, then they say the right one. Okay, I was like, what the fuck? Well, did you know that Medusa Gorgon is a shield from rape, and that Andromeda is a talisman for reconciliation? So Sedna is a talisman for finding the right one. I don't know. Now, when it comes to the working sectors and the persecution of the offenders, it's going to be the persecution like there was the persecution of the Bolsheviks. And I'm reading um, a book by a famous Norwegian author that was left on the train where I was passing, and I'm very much aware that there was intent behind that. And so it is about basically, okay, amongst many things, the persecution of people, of both the Nazis and the Bolsheviks after the Second World War. Now, both of them are funded by the oil companies. But this one deals, I think, with Esso. And it is by Jo Nesbo, a very famous author. He wrote that book. Well, the copyright here is 2000, the original copyright. I don't know if the book is from year 2000. It was translated to Hebrew in 2010. So 2010 is showing up big time, and that was the ingress of Uranus. Okay, around the ingress of Uranus to Aries, or Uranus at the end of Pisces. Um, so along with, there are also going to be the persecution of those who made war crime, and particularly for the extortion cults. Now, it's a very messy type of endeavor, because it's the story of becoming Ares. Okay? Think about the people that persecuted, let's say, the Nazis. Were they rapey? Because they could be ending up on the persecuted timeline as well. And the antidote with anything Ares is to abolish rape. So if it's by killing the rapists, as per Ares, that's what it did. But if it is by, okay, anything that abolishes rape, the best abolishing of rape is basically doing the Aries part of the chart correctly. Now, here is the thing. There is also the question, and it came about with the question of food, okay? Do people have access to the real estate where the soil is rich enough in minerals that the food is nourishing? Okay, Neptune looks at things in a holistic way, and the many things are too early to say because we haven't had that transit yet. There are many things that are missing in the equation that are completely changing the picture. However, if we go through the stories of the constellations, by the time we reach Gemini, there was a lie about commitment, and that lie could have been the lie that Andromeda had to give to her supposed savior, uh, because, of course, if she cannot say no, then she has to lie. And if she has to lie, that lie, okay, becomes something that has a telos to become discovered, okay, and one could not be blaming Andromeda for lying about relations or about commitment, because her life was dependent on that lie. Aries is also the sign of housing. Now, that lie doesn't have to be the lie that Andromeda said. It can also be that Andromeda was saved with the belief that she will become a wife, but to be able to say yes, she needs to be able to say no. And if Andromeda was saved supposedly to just be trafficked by another, then basically we're gonna meet a timeline and a trajectory where anything that another was hoping to win, and it's usually land, real estate, resources, they're not going to, either they're not going to enjoy the win, or they're also not going to win. For example, Israel has Mercury on Aldebaran. Neptune was in Libra at the time of the foundation of the Israeli state. Uranus was in Gemini, and Israel did win supposedly over the land, and its declaration of independence showed a lot of equity, gender, sex, and so on and so forth. But can Israel stand the test of time and abolish rape, which may or may not have been at the very foundation of the country? Well, Israel is having a Uranus return, and now Neptune is in Aries, the malleability of the seventh house, allies and enemies. Who will win the land? Who will abolish rape the best? Both Neptune in Aries show us that, and Uranus going across. Now, here's the thing with Uranus, and that's another Eureka that I had. Uranus is going to ingress back into Gemini. The first decan of Gemini, and I think Threads of Fate that is doing a lovely series about the decans. The first decan of Gemini, okay, and she's inspired by the 36 Faces of Austin Koppock that went viral. She took the decans and really honed in on the decans. And the first decan of them, Gemini, has two terms. One, the term of Mercury, which is the Mercury, 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 and the other, the term of Jupiter. Rahu is in the term of Jupiter. And here is where it's going to be really, really significant. The Mercury, Mercury term of the first degrees of Gemini, it's gonna look like trickery just works. Okay? It's gonna look like, well, if it works. But then we come to the second term. And if you're doing the 7 years from now on right, you're gonna enjoy the prosperity. If you're misunderstanding that the degrees of Gemini are just, how should I say that? Are a hoax, are a lie. It's not real that anything works if it's not true. Okay? If you're doing that decan of Gemini in that way where Lion is okay, this is okay, whatever works, and there's no, okay, you're gonna cross to the second decan of Gemini, and then boom, behind you, and they're gonna be behind you because you're probably going to progress with greater speed. Behind you are gonna be the people who have planned for the second decan of the second term of the first decan of Gemini. That's where Aldebaran is. And they know that the ones that take the land are the ones that abolish rape the best. Now, another country is going to have a Uranus return. Mormons, Jesuits, Utah, USA. It's Civil War clock. People try to take it back to the history to create slavery, so to abolish it. In the first decan, it's going to work. In the first term of the first decan, it's going to work, but not in the second. And I try to tell, well, it wasn't about slavery, it was about this, it was about that, or that. Those that abolished slavery got the war because we have technology to transport the goods from the farmland to other places. What happens when we abolish slavery? Oh, we can't rape anymore on the land. That's how. But what about the GMO, the industrialized, the this, the that? What's more important? How did the GMO start it? By people raping children in extortion cults to take over land and natural resources. Okay, now those that are going to look at the Uranus in the first decans of Gemini is going to look, how should I say that? Like anything works. People are really going to get the sense that they get away with that. But those behind them are those that plan for the second term. And that's the truth. That's Jupiter. This is where technology serves a certain truth. What's the benevolent thing to do on this land with technology? How is technology benevolent for the land? What would be the benevolent thing to do regarding trade? What would be the benevolent type of contract? And this is going to be the big technology, not the small one. Those are also going to be the big takeovers. So a lot of people say, well, Schiller, you're telling us that Israel victoriously won over the land in a way that was just and right? Well, they put up a document of the Declaration of Independence that talks about equity between gender, sex, and so on and so forth. They probably didn't plan to follow through. But now they will not exist unless they do. Neither would any other nation that wants to beat that. Okay? Marrying up children was not beating kidnapping of children. Okay? Now, as terrible as it is, okay, if there is a family that weds the children basically to be raped, first, them not having these children anymore is the number one step. What's later? We don't know. First, get the children out of there. Now, what happens when that begins to be isolate the mothers that come to work and kidnap their children? Well, a little bit of an issue. It's done everywhere in the world. What do you mean everywhere in the world? Well, what is the Global Court of Justice? Okay, this is why my teacher and colleague Krasia Tasio that's doing Babylonian astrology, she talks about the coming 20 years as a Rahu period for the state, for Israel, which means, okay, which means a lot of upheavals, a lot of, and Rahu is in the 8th house for Israel. And let me take a look at this chart again. But basically, to win over Israel with this midheaven in Procyon and ascendant in freaking Spica, okay, one would really have to be more just. And it's going to surprise people how corrupt the whole world is that they couldn't beat Israel in court. Because to beat is always going to the court. Okay, you can't just put another genocide, okay? By the way, story that's coming from the Philippines. They talked about if a person would harm someone from the village, they would burn the entire village. It's coming from locals, so I don't know. Now this is, I said it's a Genghis Khan set of eclipses, and there is also something that showed up as the collective punishment and the collective wealth and so on and so forth. But when you think about the collective being partaking in atrocities, it's a very intricate topic. Okay, think about the collective that was just okay with certain people not ever being able to have an income, housing, whatnot, outside of trafficking in their own industry. Okay, it can be a workplace, it can be academic, it can be whatnot. And how all of these people collectively were not standing in favor of, okay, those people that said no to trafficking. And and remember, in Ares, Saturn Neptune is the collective. In Ares, what did he do in the war? Killed all the rapists. Because the motivation is sovereignty. We can't have sovereignty without sexual sovereignty. Bloodshed was, okay, the bloodshed of the rapists was okay. Now people try to find all kind of reason and reasoning behind that and so on and so forth. I don't know. I mean, root chakra, survivalistic needs, which pertains to real estate, the identity, the blood, and so on, and the violation of that, harming the identity, the real estate, and so on and so forth, and the ability to feel that that somebody is safe and free in the world, that they exist in the world even. And somehow we got to 12 August 2025, where we had the Saturn Neptune retrograde. It just happened. I just clicked on something and that one came in. And that was, and we are 12, it takes us back to 12 August 2025. We had Saturn and Neptune conjoining on degree 1 in Aries. This was my personal Saturn, was my personal Neptune square, and I have Neptune in Saturn sign. And the moon was crossing over that, sextiling Pluto and Uranus. Uranus was direct with Sedna in Gemini. Venus and Jupiter met on the degree on Sirius. So a lot of juxtapositions. Uranus Sedna, Venus Jupiter. Venus Jupiter is once in 80 something years as well. Saturn Neptune and Pluto trine in that in the second degree of Aquarius. Chiron was 27 degrees. And so there was those to try to hijack the timeline. How should I say that? When they don't honor sexual sovereignty, they're gonna run out of fuel. And I also mentioned typhus. Okay. All kinds of sexually transmitted disease. I didn't go into the history of, let's say, AIDS or something like that. And but definitely those that thought to rely on slavery as markets are going to be losing the markets. They're going to be losing the. And you see, one thing that I saw with the moose, completely engineered, and yet we have to look at the engineering, that even the engineers have to abide by certain rules. They were killing a lot of the moose population so that the ticks could not suck the blood of the moose and harm the bone marrow. Can it get any more Rosicrucian? and and basically what happened is that they say that it kind of worked, but they're just less moose. So basically what's happening naturally in times of trying to globally enslave people is those diseases that kill the slaves, so that those that relied on having many slaves are gonna have to do with hardly having any slaves. In which case, their endeavors and economy will not sustain the industrialization that they wanted to bring about, else they have to accommodate that the slaves will not die. How do the slaves not die? Well, they have to have sovereignty. Otherwise they get sick. Okay. So how does one enslave people? You see, when slavery looked like somebody living on a